Hello, everyone. Welcome. My name is Carol, and I'm here to talk to you about time, specifically your time and your relationship with it. So, the reason that I'm doing this is because your time is literally all that you have in this world. You can't guarantee health, you can't guarantee happiness, you can't even guarantee existing. But while you do exist, time is what you have. And most of us have a pretty complex relationship with time. Despite most of us treating time as these sort of discrete, interchangeable quantities, time is actually pretty elastic in most of our personal experiences. Sometimes it feels like it's going by too fast, sometimes too slow. Often it feels like there isn't enough of it at all. And a fair encapsulation of this is the fact that most of us at this conference probably have, on average, 3,000 weeks of time left, which does not feel like a lot. Yet, that meeting you were sitting in yesterday probably felt like it lasted forever. So, a more accurate title for this talk is probably going to be Investigating Our Relationship with Time. So, let's dive in. Let's tackle this biggest aspect of our relationship first. Not morbid, Kevin. It is a sobering fact for you all. We are all going to die, which is not morbid. That's just a fact. We can talk about that more if we want. This biggest aspect of our relationship first is that there isn't enough time. We often feel like there isn't enough time for everything that I want to do. And we all have long lists of things that we want to do and things that we need to do. And I want to acknowledge that. What I want to also point out, though, is that this list doesn't ever actually get shorter. There will always be more demands on your time, the same way that your inbox will always get refilled no matter how many times you hit inbox zero. Getting more done in half an hour now doesn't always mean that you'll have more half an hour of free time later because like a gas, the things that you could be doing expand to fit the time that you have. And so we can't stem this tide of demands. And honestly, accepting this fact is probably step zero of this entire talk. So, how can you make time work for you? And I have two suggestions here for investigating this relationship. The first one is that in whatever you're looking at, whether that's like a half hour, a day, a week, a project, or some other open ended process, figure out what your actual desired end state is and stay oriented to it. In other words, find your North Star. The second part of that is once you've identified your North Star, chart a path there that's faithful to yourself. And we'll cover these piece by piece. So, North Star is what do you want at the end of this? And maybe a nicer way that I like to think about it is how do you want to feel at the end of this? Do you want to feel competent? Do you want to feel badass? Do you want to feel accomplished? Do you want to feel relieved? And I'm going to take a personal example here from my professional life of how to put this into practice. But again, this holds into any kind of journey that you're taking through time, which is basically everything that we're all doing, whether it's an errand, a task, a chore, or a process. The example that I'm going to use is when you suddenly realize you have something to do and much less time than you think. Like maybe when you agreed to give a conference talk in September a few months ago and waved it off because, oh, that's in fall, that's ages away. And boy, was it a surprise when I turned around, it was a week into September. Common advice for trying to get started on anything is to break it down into tasks. This is great if you're stuck, if you don't know how to get started, if it feels too insurmountable to get started, or if in this case, often you feel a time crunch. So, just a little bit of background on me that I didn't cover up top. By day, I'm a program manager for a developer advocacy team. So I spend a lot of time talking to our advocates about how good talks take time, only practice makes perfect, set milestones so it doesn't creep up on you. But of course, this is a lot easier said than done. So when this talk crept up on me, I went back to my basics and pulled up my conference talk checklist that I share with people, barreled right in, and I was like, abstract, outline, content, slides, dry run, gotta do my team rehearsal and be ready on the 15th. And my thinking there, as with most checklists that we consult, is that as long as I check all of these things off, I'll be okay on September 15th. But when I actually started writing this talk, the talk that I thought I was originally going to give, that was about inbox zero and why that's a myth, didn't really make any sense anymore with what I wanted to impart. And so on the day that I was supposed to have checked off my dry run, I was still sitting at my computer at like nearly 7 o'clock. I'd had 6 meetings that day. I had 10 pages of just brain dump thoughts, ranging from when humans started measuring time, which depends on your definition of time, all the way through to what percentage of time what percentage of people feel like they don't have enough time, which actually ranges anywhere from 50 to 65%, depending on which study you use. I was not happy at this moment with my relationship with time, mainly because I had lost sight of my North Star. Instead of being focused on my goal, what I wanted at the end of this, I had gotten fixated on the task that I needed to check off. So, if you step back, like I did here, and remind myself, what is my actual ultimate goal for this project? It's to be prepared to give a talk on the 15th. And so, how can I make the time that I have right now work for me? If we look at my situation, I'm like, I still have more than a week. What I really need to feel today is to feel like I have some idea of what I'm actually going to talk about. And I looked at my 10 pages of notes and I was like, I probably have 3 to 5 ideas buried in this. Let's go have dinner. So, not only identify your North Star, but constantly reorient it for what it is. It's really easy to get pulled in different directions by demands on your time that seem important or tell you that they're important. But think about whether they'll serve how you want to feel at the end of the day. We have my 10 pages of notes. What am I going to do with them to turn them into a talk? Let's see how we can chart a path to our North Star of being ready on the 15th. And most importantly, chart a path that's faithful to yourself. And I'll explain how that means. You saw we talked about a little bit how checklists can be helpful and unhelpful. I want to say they're great as a guide. They break things down into manageable stages. And an easy thing to do when charting any path that's unfamiliar to you is to look at how other people have done it. But these kind of checklists can also take over your focus by getting you fixated on things that might not be faithful to how you like to interact with time. Like a particularly pernicious way you see this in those like 30 things you need to have done before 30, or like top 10 mistakes you're probably making when doing X. And these are built to trigger that worry that you're somehow behind or that you've been, quote, wasting your time. So the thing that I'd ask you to remember here is this is your time. Why would you spend it unhappily? How can you take these checklists or ideas and make them versions that you enjoy, or at least don't dread so much that you never do them? Just because somebody else has gotten it done this way doesn't mean that's the way that you have to go about it as well. So, what's the happiest way you can get to your North Star? So let's revisit what we're now calling a guide. I had everything on the left here already. I had read the abstract to get accepted. I had that outline then as well. I had content, probably too much content to be honest, but I was really hitting a wall at step 4, slides. And one might conclude accurately, that's because I hate making slides. I'm a writer, not a designer, and I've stated that very easily and simply that my skills lie in writing, but I figured that out through experience and just through looking back and contemplating how I like to use my time. So, how can you figure this out? And this can be hard. One way that you can do it when you step back and take a bird's eye view is to look back on a day or a week. What did it feel like it took forever to do? When did time fly by in a pleasant way? What felt like a time sink where you spent so much time on it, but it never felt like you made progress? There's no reason to shoehorn tasks that aren't true to yourself in your own time. If you need a version of this is a little bit more practical versus reflective, you can just take a look at your to-do list for the week, whether that's like for your job or daily life, and take note of what keeps getting moved to the next day and what you happily are like, yeah, I'm going to do that first. And if you split chores or household tasks with somebody, what do you get done first and what do you wait until somebody like asks you to do? To come back to this talk example, I had this real preordained checklist of how to get to my North Star of being prepared. And according to this list, I should have had my slides by now and be well into practicing. But the keyword here is should. If I replace this with what would I like to have done this Tuesday before the talk, or Thursday, or Friday? We've established that I would like to have an idea of what I'm talking about. The next step is probably I'd like to know what the big takeaways are, where I want to pause to let something sink in, kind of the one idea that I hope people could take away from my chat. And I obviously love brain dumping and researching all of the tangents I come up with along the way, moving all the pieces around, just writing. So if I took a bird's eye view of what kept hanging out, I was totally putting off making my slides. And there wasn't any actual reason that I needed to have this checked off. For in this particular case, there was no external force like a conference organizer or manager asking for my slides. So for me, it was actually better to spend more time writing and rewriting because that was the truest, happiest way for me to get to my end goal. I didn't even start making the slide deck until I had my talk practically fully written out in full text. And here's the secret here. This was not planned. I didn't try this way of doing it literally until I was writing this talk because I was like, if I'm going to use this example, I better both talk the talk and walk the walk and some kind of like real meta practical application here. And the mind blowing thing here is that my slides actually took way less time than they normally do because I was following my own checklist of doing them and I did them last. If I had tried to do what I should have done, I would have actually compromised my ultimate end goal and compromised my own time. I would have spent 5 times as long on it and ended up with a talk that was nowhere near as coherent because it just wasn't true to my way of spending time and my way of getting there. So, really, it doesn't matter how you get to the North Star as long as your path is faithful to yourself. And just sort of the last thing that I want to ask you to think about as I go over time by a couple minutes is that we started off this talk talking about your relationship with time. And the key word there is relationship. We've spoken a lot about how to spend your time most meaningfully or qualitatively. But if we look at having a relationship with time, just the same way you would have a relationship with anybody else or anything else, you wouldn't spend all your time trying to do things. You would also just spend some time just being together. So I want to add that it's okay just to exist in your relationship with time as well. I can already feel that like some of us cringe at this because many of us are grown up and taught that the act of doing nothing, of being unproductive, sloth, is so terrible that it's literally a cardinal sin. And it wasn't until really recently that I even started questioning why that was so bad. So just think about, what does it bring up in you when you consider the idea of spending time being, quote, unproductive? Why does just existing sometimes feel like you're wasting your time? How much any of us might be measuring our worth based on productivity when you're definitely not defined by what you get done? And just as my parting words, just be gently curious about the learned beliefs that you hold on how time should be spent. And oops, I don't think this slide loaded, but it's okay. Consider just existing and drifting every once in a while. I hope that these 10 minutes have been a meaningful way for you to spend some time together in conversation or Q&A. I want to put out there that I'm actually truly happy to chat about or answer questions on anything from time management to DevRel to television. So feel free to chime in and share any thoughts that you have on time.